Thanks.
Yay, welcome. Good morning.
Hi, Stacy. How are you?
I'm well. Oh, you just see the top of my head.
There
Okay,
you are.
here we go.
Perfect.
I'm well. How was your Halloween?
It was good. We have a tradition where we don't trick or treat in our neighborhood, actually. 6 years now, we've gone to a friend's neighborhood and they have a great trick or treat street. And
Yeah.
yeah, we had a great time. We had pizza, we had lots of candy. And yeah, my kids were Ebenezer Scrooge,
Nice.
the unicorn. Yeah.
Wait,
How about
what was the other? You said Ebenezer Scrooge and what was the?
a unicorn?
Oh, a unicorn. Oh, nice.
Classic. Classic.
And it is a good street good because of the candy or the decorations or just?
I'd say it's as is on brand. It's very community based. Like it feels very. There's a ton of people out in the streets, a ton of kids. There's
Mm,
people who do like street patrol,
yep.
just sort of keep cars out of the street, and some people really go for it decoration wise, like a level of creativity. And I don't know. I had this moment where I was like, this seems like a lot. But then I felt really moved. I was like, here are people going the extra mile just so that like strangers have a moment of happiness. Like I'm not that generous. Come to Halloween, right? So I was feeling really like, yeah, I found it really moving. There was like all kinds of
Yeah.
wonderful decorations, interactive stuff where kids are like spinning a wheel for candy. It
Oh,
was
wow.
really great. Yeah.
Yeah, that's all out. It feels like any gesture like that means so much after the last 2.5, 3 years we've all been through. Like, how can we bring some joy and delight and connection in?
Yeah.
That
It's,
feels so important.
we all need it so much. And we all know that it's very easy to just like not engage, right? To stay home, right?
Yeah.
And the idea of like welcoming people into your space and creating that space for them is really cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, anything that allows me to like Snickers bars is like, yeah.
Snickers
We
is my number one up for sure. And then Sour Patch Kids is my
Oh, Sour Patch Kids. Oh, you're a fruity person.
sour, more sour.
Sour.
Other candy, yeah, Snickers if I had to choose chocolate, but a Sour Patch Kid for all other purposes.
Yeah. Welcome to everyone who's joining. We hope you had a good, fun Halloween yesterday. We're so excited to have this Instagram live conversation this morning, if you're on the West Coast with us. We're just going to chat a little bit more just to welcome folks in, and then we'll get started. How are you doing in election season, Angela?
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I've spent a lot of this year feeling pretty well ever since the Build Back Better passed. We have like it's great, like environmental stuff, climate, right? But like the lack of movement on care, which I know we're gonna get into, has been really hard for me. Um, and I just like can't deny that. So I have to say that. And so I'm kind of like I'm doing what I need to do. I'm paying attention, I'm voting, but I'm also like realizing for my own sort of like mental and emotional health, I'm grateful for the work that you do. So I feel like I can sort of like take a step back, collect myself, like feel like I can get into a better place and continue to fight,
Yeah.
fight. And the truth is like if you don't rest and sort of like take a step back and remind yourself like what we're really here for, it can be discouraging.
Yeah.
So that's to be totally honest, like that's where I've been.
Yeah.
But I'm not going anywhere. Like here we are. We're going to talk about this stuff, and I can't think of a better fight to be in, a better long-term fight. This issue care is so important. It's fundamental, and it's never going away. And the need for care will never go away. So our need for people to represent our priorities and care will stay. And so, yeah.
Yeah.
You.
Yeah, no, it's been so important for me to that hand in hand as my work home, but also just political home has
Yeah.
been really trying to lead the charge around care, and particularly the unique role that us who are either caregivers within our own homes or hire someone in our homes, the role that we can play to actually influence systemic change, the fact that our voices really matter, and the personal story that we've begun to hear through our I Care, I Vote project.
Mm-hmm.
Just, the stories that maybe people talk about with their closest friends, but
Right.
don't go public with, about
Yeah.
I'm struggling with this piece around childcare, I'm struggling with these pieces around home care for family members. For a lot of folks with disabilities, the challenge to even get access to find someone to come and support them in the home. All of those, I think, have so often been seen as like, that's yours. It's in your
That's
pocket.
your private individual problem.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When in fact, so it's so universal,
Mm-hmm.
it actually is a public issue. And so
Yeah,
to your point,
absolutely.
that's why we need our leadership in our country and in our communities to be advancing care. Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. So it's been great. It's felt good to be all the work that Hand in Hand is engaged in, and then to see all the work everyone's doing around the country to defend our democracy on for so many different issues. It just feels like it's scary, but it's also beautiful. The
Yeah.
ways people really.
Yeah. I mean, I always think about, like I said, I feel like I've been in a hard place about it, but like I can't be hopeless. Like we can't afford to be, right? Like it feels like a luxury to opt out. You know what I mean? Like, so I think it's really, but I get that it can be hard for people, but it's really beautiful. I love what you're saying. You know, we feel again that the care issues are personal problems when they are, just to name it, and we'll come back to this, these are massive systemic failings, right? That have been like by design. And I think it's really moving when you're like really struggling with something and you open yourself up to somebody and then you hear back from them and you realize everyone, everyone you know is dealing with a care issue. I mean, they may not be in crisis, but people are thinking about a relative, you know what I mean? An elder, a child, right? Like it is like so universal. Everyone has that need. And when we share those things, it's so much easier to feel connected to people and then to build collective power from there.
Yep. 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 Yep.
So
Well,
should we dive in?
let's dive in. Hi, everyone. We see you waving at us. This is so cool. Welcome to this Instagram Live conversation. I'm Stacy Kono. I see her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Hand in Hand, the Domestic Employers Network. I'm based in Berkeley, California, and I'm a family caregiver to my parents, who are not far from me, and to my uncle who's in Los Angeles. Um, I'm super excited to be hosting this conversation today with Angela Garbes, the author. Where's my book? The author of Essential Labor, as well as Mothering. I don't have a copy. I think I already had to return it back to the library.
All right.
But we're going to have a conversation about Angela's book, but also about how it relates to all of our lives and this moment. Let me tell you a little bit about Hand in Hand for those of you who haven't heard of us or are just getting connected for the first time. We're a national organization that is focused on building the leadership and power of people who employ nannies, house cleaners, and home care workers in their homes to support them with managing their households, caring for their little ones, supporting the older adults in their lives, providing daily support to folks with disabilities so that they can live in their homes rather than be forced into institutions. We're really working with unique audience people we call domestic employers to use their stories and power to create care policies and systems that work for everyone. So care policies that ensure that domestic workers, these workers, are treated with dignity and respect. They're getting paid a family sustaining wage so that in fact we're creating the workforce for employers to hire, but also to make sure that there's public investment in home care, child care, that we have paid family leave policies that really ensure that all of our families and communities can live and thrive. We were just talking earlier about just how care is too often seen as this private, personal thing you got to take care of, when in fact all of us who are part of what we call the caring majority in our country, people
I like
to care, right?
yeah.
All of us know that no, actually this is a universal concern with different parts of our lives, different times, but care, we need to take on care as a public issue.
Yeah.
Public health.
Can I ask you how long Hand in Hand has been around? Is that all right?
Yeah. We just celebrated our 12th anniversary. So we've been around 12 years. We were founded in connection to the National Domestic Workers Alliance that started the first fight for a domestic workers bill of rights in New York State.
Yeah.
And saw how, yes, we've got to organize domestic workers, women of color, immigrant women workforce to fight for rights and protections, but also the strategy of involving employers who really get, yes, we want dignity and respect for this workforce too. We want fair wages and benefits for this workforce too. To have them join has been really a powerful force.
Yeah,
and that's a role for us to play.
And like, that's why I want to support you guys any way I can. I feel like, care is about a relationship, and people who, first of all, I think that there's a lot of people who employ domestic workers, but don't actually think of themselves as being domestic employers, right? Like, because we're like, in society, we don't tend to see caregiving. We tend to call it low skilled, which anyone who's taking care of a child or someone with vulnerability and needs knows, like, it's highly skilled work and it's very challenging. And that's a very professional workforce. And to think about formalizing that relationship and really building on that sort of intimacy and connection that people have, I think it's great to empower domestic workers, but you need people with like social and economic privilege, the people who employ them, to be, I think there's that gap there. And that's what I love about what you do, that you're bridging that gap and bringing people together. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Cool. Well, so I've introduced, let me introduce Angela. Angela's in Seattle, wrote Like a Mother, that won the NPR Best Book of the Year Award in 2018 and was a finalist for the Washington State Book Award. She's written for the New York Times, The Cut, New York, Bon Appetit, and also been featured on NPR's Fresh Air. And then more recently, if you ever get an email from her, The Daily Show with Trevor Noah about her book, Essential Labor. She's first generation Filipina and a mother of two. She's been a strong supporter, as you can hear from what she's talking about, of the domestic workers movement. And I'm super excited to have this conversation with her today. So welcome. I keep seeing all these people waving at the bottom of the Instagram screen. We're glad to have you here. If you have questions, feel free to post them in the comment. We have a moderator, Jimena, who's checking it out, and we'll try to leave some time at the end for questions. We're also going to be doing a drawing at the end of this conversation for a copy of Essential Labor. For folks who take our I Care, I Vote pledge, which you can take anytime during the event. And what we'll do is we'll pull together everyone who signed during this Instagram Live and do a little bit of a drawing, and someone's going to win a copy of this book. Cool. So let's get into it. So in your book, the focus of mothering as social change, you talk about, though, this essential labor as not limited to the people who give birth to children. Can you tell us more about what you mean and why this work is essential?
Yeah, I mean, it is. Well, I think about let me just start with my big belief, which is that, raising children is a social responsibility, right? Like, when we take care of children, when we take care of families, we are, really investing in the health and well-being of our entire society, right? And in our country, parents tend to feel like you're really on your own until your child is 6 years old and can go to public school, right? Like, there's improvements being made on that with pre-K, but it's far from universal, right? And then with a lack of, guaranteed federal paid leave, it's so much harder than it should be to take care of your people and to take care of yourself. And so I really I think about it, and, like, the book is primarily about childcare, but I'm not trying to privilege one kind of care over the other. I also think about caring for elders. There's so many of us who are taking care of children and our parents at the same time.
Yeah.
There are many of us who are taking care of, for women who provide the majority of care in America. One of the reasons why the gender pay gap exists is because throughout their careers, whether you are a mother or not, women are expected to leave the workforce if there is a care need within their family. Like if that's an uncle, right, or a brother, like people are expected to leave and then come back and are at a disadvantage. So I just think about how we just can't care for each other alone. Like two parents are not enough for one child. And one parent is not enough. You really need to rely on your village. And I think about how, for me to get through and raise my children, I need my spouse, I need my mother, I need my father, I need my neighbors, I need teachers, I need early childhood educators. We had a nanny for a nanny share that we did with my oldest child. Like, there's like beloved aunties, chosen family. There's good family friends, like who have become like friends who have become family, right? And so I wanted to think about a way to call people in to this work and to show people that we all have a role to play. Like, I think if we were to reflect on our life, like I can think about nobody makes it through the vulnerability of infancy or childhood, or like the sort of like tumultuousness of adolescence, right? Without people caring for them, right? And that extends well beyond the family. Like my parents are first generation immigrants from the Philippines. There were so many things I could not talk to them about, or that I felt I could not, or that they didn't want to talk to me about, right? Like there was a lot of silence. And so I had my friends. I had a teacher who I was really close to in high school, right? Like there were people in my life. I've had mentors. And that is all, I'm not the first person. So I think, motherhood is a noun, and the identity of mother is very important to me, but it can be like motherhood is a noun that can be static. And when I think about care work, I think about how care lives in action, so many repeated actions and tending to the body and really like attuning to people. And so I like mothering because it's a verb, that gets at day in, day out activity. And the other thing about that is it is not gender specific, and it is not parent specific. And so I did not like coin this term. I want to shout out Alexis Pauline. Like so many things, I've taken this from Black feminism. So many things that I have learned. So Alexis Pauline Gumbs in a great book called Revolutionary Mothering, which was edited by her, China Martins, and Maya Williams. Also, my friend Danny McLean has an incredible book, We Live for the We, The Political Power of Black Motherhood. They really expand the definition of mothering to include anyone who is involved in the work of affirming and nurturing life. And like it extends beyond children. It goes in every direction, generationally and age-wise. It calls everyone into this work, which we cannot. It's our responsibility as humans to care for people, to care for each other. And so I think it's really important to for all of us to be included in that, and for all of us to be called into that.
Oh, I love that. And the genderlessness of mothering, and yet the ways in which patriarchy and sexism actually put the extra weight of that labor on
absolutely.
And women of color in particular.
But it's true. It's very gendered work here in America, and it's very racialized work. It's extremely
Well, that takes me to my next question, which, your book calls on all of us to finally properly acknowledge the role of care in our society and honor its place in all of our lives, and particularly this piece around racial and gender justice. Why do you think it's necessary to center Black immigrant, people of color, and immigrant women in the role, as Bell Hooks says, and as your book does, imperialist white supremacist heteropatriarchy, when we talk about the essential labor of care?
Yeah, well, there's a reason, because it's fundamental. Like, we can't have an honest conversation. We can't have a complete or real conversation if we don't talk about this. The majority of domestic workers, I want to say, you probably know this better than I do, I want to say it's like 67% of domestic workers are either, Asian, American Pacific Islander, they're Latinx, they are Black, African American, right? And so many of these workers are mothers themselves, right? So this is, we are people who look like us are overrepresented in this work. And really, you know, when I wrote my book, I was trying to make sense of the present moment that we were in. And I wrote it during the pandemic. And what had happened was public schools were closed, childcare centers were closed. And if we can all, I don't like to dwell there, but if we can all go back to that moment when people were trying to do their professional jobs at home and take care of their children, and then also try to manage online school. I mean, people were falling apart, you know. I was depressed, you know. I was kind of losing my mind. I felt like I didn't have there wasn't any support. I was feeling like I was being left behind, and the tremendous amount of work that I was doing was like not being acknowledged, right? And I was like, how did we get to this place where, you know, care, which is performed again majority by Black and brown women, how did we get to this place where, like, for a lot of people, it was like the first time that they realized without these women, like, society really grinds to a halt. And I think there are a lot of us who have been aware of this and have known this, but there was this moment where I was like, oh, this is part of why I wrote my book, is I was like, I don't want us to forget this, and I want us to like understand and learn in this moment, like, how did we get to this place? And it really also so that we can move forward and have something that is more equitable and better and sustainable. And what I found in researching was just really how much we need to reckon with the past. You know, the reason why we are represented, women of color are represented in this work, is it's structural, it's by design. Yeah. One of the things that we don't talk enough about is it's a direct legacy of slavery in America, right? So generations of Black women worked in the home. The home has always been a workplace for Black women in America. And like, this is one thing I struggled with in my book. It's like, how do I explain that the entire American economic system, all American wealth, is built inherently on the exploitation of women of color? Mm-hmm. Right? And so we are in the situation that we are in because of how we built this country. Mm-hmm. And so yes, like, you know, slavery ended, but as we all know, like, these low wage jobs of caring for people in the home, and we call them low skill, but that's really a myth. I think that we say that to justify paying lower wages, and I think it really all comes down to that we just don't see women of color as being as deserving or as being as fully human as other people, as white men and women. So there's no getting around that. And I think that's a very uncomfortable truth for people to confront, but I just don't see any way. We have to have some level of accountability in that. But what I'm more interested in really is like, but where do we go from here, right? Like, how do we value that? And so, I mean, I also want to say that when I was thinking about these things, when I was writing my book, I use a lot of personal narrative, and I was like, how am I going to, like, my ancestors were not enslaved. Like, how do I can tell this history with like sensitivity and be as inclusive as I can, but like, I also felt a little bit like this isn't my story to tell exactly. But in the pandemic, there was a statistic that emerged that really it put my whole book together and really brought the issue home to me. And it's a statistic about Filipinx nurses. So my mom is a nurse. My parents are healthcare workers. My dad is the first person in his family to go to college. He became a doctor, and my mother became a nurse. And really, the reason why that happened is because, and we don't talk about this history that much, but the Philippines was an American colony at this point. And so my parents were raised in an education system that was based on American public schools. They were raised speaking English, and the United States set up medical schools and nursing schools, and they presented it to Filipinos as a way of finding economic opportunity, right? That's true, right? And it certainly worked out that way for my parents. But internally, to themselves, American government officials talked about how they were setting up these healthcare systems because they needed to sanitize the population that was inherently diseased and dirty and primitive, right? So my parents benefited from this, but it's so much, their lives were really sort of shaped by very racist beliefs and imperialist, to invoke bell hooks again, this imperialist patriarchy. And that's something that I like understood about my family, but didn't really know. And so in the pandemic, gosh, I don't know how to go. It's hard to talk about this without talking about all of this history. So my parents, they they graduated with their degrees, and then in 1970 they emigrated to America. And they were allowed to do this because there was a healthcare worker shortage in the United States. And in 1965, the U.S. raised immigration quotas for highly skilled immigrants. And my parents qualified under that, and they came here and they worked. So like, this is the reason why I'm an American. This is the reason why I'm here. But so Filipinx nurses are, they're overrepresented in critical care and ICU care because it's a very familiar storyline for immigrants. They came here and they took jobs that white people didn't want. So ICU jobs are much more physically intimate with patients, and they were considered less desirable for white nurses. So Filipino nurses took on a lot of those jobs. And that meant, since March of 2020, that Filipino nurses were disproportionately caring for COVID patients. So we're all sort of aware of how in the pandemic, people of color were dying disproportionately, right? Talk about how that was within the healthcare industry. So Filipinx nurses are 4% of the nursing population. And they're around 34% of COVID-related nursing deaths. Right? Like, and so that was, I mean, I read that and I was like, oh my God, like this is my mother. This is so many women that I know and love and am close to. And that was when I was like, aha, like this is how I can tell the story, the very racialized and gendered story of care in America, right? And it's a way of building solidarity. And I also think like we need more people within our community, Asian Americans, recognizing, anti-Blackness, right, in our country and speaking about that.
Yeah.
I saw how, right, like the story of enslaved ancestors is not my family's story to tell, but my family's story is really important. And it's the same forces that shape, right? It's capitalism, it's colonialism, it's extraction, it's exploitation, it's right. And so when you get at the root of those things, that's how we can begin to value. That's how we got a care workforce that is mainly Black and brown women. And so there's no way, if you don't understand the roots of it, I don't know how you can move forward and like create an equitable system, because you're just going to be like adding band-aids without fixing the fundamental issues. And so that's why my very long answer. We need to talk about this. We haven't listened. We haven't listened to women of color. And, I think about this too, historically, when we have been, we all learn when we learn about feminism. And I went to a women's college. I learned about Betty Friedan, and I learned about, how, and this sort of like lean in, find meaning outside of the home and professional work, which is empowering for a lot of people. But like domestic work never went away. And so while people were like not enslaved, it was Black and brown women who did the domestic work for white, right? Again, we never dealt with that fundamentally, right?
Yeah.
And so I just think about how at the same time in my research, I realized like, so Betty Friedan was like, go get jobs outside of the home. It's the National Welfare Rights Organization, who was looking at the same set of circumstances of women living in poverty, right? And trying to empower people. And, this was an organization led by Black women, by Native women, like by women of color. And their conclusion was not women go out, and work a professional job and like outsource your domestic labor. Their solution was, let's give everyone a guaranteed income. Their solution, which is like true intersectional, true feminism, was like, why don't we like lift, it's like the rising tide that lifts all boats. Why don't we help everyone?
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that we wouldn't be in the same situation if we had listened to them, but I think it would be very different, right? Like, I think people, historically, women of color have been very much closer to better solutions, but because we are further away from power, people don't listen to us. And those solutions have not been implemented. So that's why I think we have to always center the voices of women of color when we talk about care work and domestic labor.
Absolutely. Oh, thank you. Thank you for that. And for contextualizing it within your own personal, but like geopolitical story, your own family, how each of our, for my paternal grandmother was a domestic worker here in the Bay Area. And it was really the only work she could get as somebody who could not speak English fluently. And she did share with me different stories of just the way she was treated, a bell being rung to her to help the kids, or, you know, it's just, and the lack of actual really formality to the work, despite how essential that labor is to so many families. I mean, it has its roots, right, in the National Labor Relations Act and the New Deal excluding Black workers and ultimately workers of color from domestic workers and farm workers from the labor protections that all the rest of us have.
Yes, and there's only one explanation.
Like you said, it's built into the system.
It's racism. It's believing that these people don't deserve a living wage. It's believing, you know, and I also want to say that I think, like, this is the moment that we're in, which is why I'm so glad to be having this conversation, because I think I want to acknowledge, I think people who are here in this IG Live and people who are engaged in this now, I think there's a lot of realizing what we've been complicit in without meaning to be.
Yeah.
We inherited this system, right? And many of us were not trained, especially if you, to generalize it, but especially if you grow up white, like, you're not trained to question the system that benefits you. But what I've really seen in the last 2 years, you know, with this reckoning that we're having, you know, like that happened with the murder of George Floyd, and I think it's been building though, is people are now like, oh shit, like I have this privilege, and I don't want to just feel guilty about it. Like, I want to do something about it, but also I don't totally know what to do about it. Right? Yeah. And that's why I'd love for you to speak now about, because that's really where I think, like, Hand in Hand is like such a great resource, like the work that you've been doing now for a dozen years. I think it's meeting people where they are at with like really good intentions and really wanting to live their values, but not really being set up or handed the tools to best do that.
Yeah. It's the same conditions that create low wages, no benefits, exploitation, discrimination and harassment for workers that actually creates the vacuum of information for people who are hiring workers in their homes. So they don't know. They oftentimes, I think the folks at National Domestic Workers Alliance call it the Wild West, because people just making things up because they don't know what else to do.
Right. Yeah.
Our department down the hall. Right. So in some ways, the approach we've taken to organizing with domestic employers is to make sure they get the information and support they need, because they too, just like the workers, are isolated in figuring this out, that they understand the historical and systemic context that we are all working in, and can move out of such that they can see this inequality is not inherent. I can actually do something differently in the way that I employ someone, in the way that I pay someone, in the way that I'm communicating with them, rather than give into the what's built into the system that sort of directs us towards seeing this or not seeing this work. This work
I think all of us want to be better than the default. That's kind of
we actually have power and choice to be able to do something different. Yeah. So there's sort of multiple layers to it, right? On one layer, when people are coming to us, they're often like, I'm hiring a nanny for the first time, or I'm hiring a home care worker for the first time. How do I do that? And what we try to do is offer resources from sample contracts, tips around communications, as well as other sorts of guides and guidelines that interrupt those structures. How can you actually make this work visible? How can you actually do everything you can to interrupt the pattern of exploitation and low wages of this workforce? So that's one piece of it. And we offer a workshop called My Home is Someone's Workplace to really, again, interrupt. Wait a sec. My home is a workplace.
Just saying that, you know, like, imagine like looking at yourself in the mirror and being like, my home is someone's workplace. I think it's powerful, right? To be like, how do I want to be treated in my workplace if I go to work? Like, that's a very, you know, to realize, to see that you are not really different from the people that you employ. I think that's very powerful, and just that sort of pause.
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead.
No, no, no. Well, and you were naming, right, that feelings come up for people around that. There's some shame or embarrassment. There's some uh just pieces around like, oh gosh, what does it mean for me to be an employer? I don't want that. I don't to hold that, especially when they understand sort of the structures we live under of white supremacy and patriarchy and the anti-immigrant pieces, all of those pieces, it can feel like a heavy lift. But we really believe all of us actually need each other.
Yes.
As if there's no shame in getting support. And in fact, that's what makes our communities and our families work. So to try to reframe that, that frame of like, oh, now I have privilege and I'm scared of it, to being, I can actually play a role hand in hand with workers to transform the way our care economy works. So there's one level of work that we do that's just purely education. And then there's also, just as you're pointing to, there's much larger systemic issues that we as a country need to build our power and courage to fight against, to transform and change. And so working to create policies that protect domestic workers' rights and bring them respect, because of that 1930s exclusion of workers, racist exclusion from labor laws and protections. In Seattle, actually, where you're at, we fought for, alongside domestic workers, to win the Seattle Domestic Workers Ordinance, which provides domestic workers with minimum wage protections, rest breaks and days off, protections from discrimination and harassment, and prohibits documents like their passports being taken away from workers by the employer. Some of that seems pretty basic for most of us who are working people, right?
It is basic. That's exactly what domestic workers lack.
Exactly. So we really invite employers to join these fights, because we know we have a shared stake in transforming the way this work happens. And we worked closely with Casa Latina and Fair Work Center Working Washington in Seattle to develop that policy, and are now working on actually advancing a policy around paid time off for domestic workers. Because too often, especially for house cleaners, but in general for this workforce, it's hard to say, can I get paid time off? How do I do that? I want to spend time with my loved one who's ill. I myself am sick. I want to even go on a field trip with my daughter. None of those things are available to so many domestic workers because of the way this work has been.
I know. I can't take the rest and time that I deserve, because if I do, I'll fall behind.
Yeah.
Right? The lack of money, and we think about it, most people, if you work for a wage outside of the home, no matter what the conditions are, most people get some level of paid time off or vacation, even if it's just a few days, right? But those are all things that what we've normalized in all labor, I think, is we don't get all of the things that we deserve, right? And that's especially true for domestic workers. And I think about, I want to go back to this feeling of that awkwardness that people feel. I've seen people be really sheepish where they're like, well, I have a nanny and I feel terrible about it. And I just want to clear the air around that and be like, I think it's great that you have a nanny. I'm so glad that you can afford support, because you need that. It's too much for everyone to cook 21 meals a week. That's a lot of cooking, right? No one person or no two people can do all of that.
Yeah.
I think the piece is, though, guilt, right, or shame doesn't do anything. It keeps us small. It keeps things private, right? And it doesn't benefit the workers. And who does it benefit? It doesn't benefit the domestic employers. It doesn't benefit the workers. It benefits the system as it is, which relies on our silence, which relies on our shame. And I think about this is the place, joining hand in hand, taking advantage of these resources. I looked at the sample work agreements are, there's one for the city of Seattle. If you're here from Seattle, you can go look at that, right? There's one for New York City. So there's one for nanny shares. There's one for if you employ a house cleaner, right? When you start to formalize those things, it's about expectations, and it's really about, showing that respect. And I think you can move from a place of silence and feeling weird and awkward about something to having a real relationship with the person that you employ, with knowing the people and their families' names, like knowing what's going on with them, and like that idea of like needing each other and being connected, right? Like I really think like that sort of formality is important to doing that. It acknowledges the inherent importance and necessity of that care work in your home. And
Mm.
wonderful way for us to like deal with whatever feelings we have, and then also directly materially benefit the people who are working in our homes, who make us feel cared for, who make our everyday like possible, you know. And that's a very like, I just don't think we can ever like, building relationships with people takes time. It's
Mm.
sort of, it's inefficient, right, compared to like the sort of productivity and work that we're all asked to do. But I think about what it gives us as humans,
Yeah.
satisfaction that it gives us, which is you don't know it until you have it. And then why would you, can you imagine, like, I don't know, I feel like when you get to know the people, really get to know the people who are caring for you and your children, and this is true for me, I mean, like, I care about them for life, even if I don't talk to them all the time, right? Like, that is such a it's so meaningful, and we all feel better in that. And I think that we should all be, that's what we should be working towards.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to like look forward. So these are like, here are things that the resources that you have at hand in hand. And I encourage everyone to join, to like spend some time on the website, right? We have if you're in Washington State, Dana is a wonderful organizer here who would love to hear from you, who would love to help educate you and talk through things with you, right? Again, that education and resource, like, this is here. Hand in Hand has been doing this for years. Like, they will meet you where you're at and like help you move forward, right? So I think about how these individual changes that we make in our lives, they really do matter, right? Paying someone more, giving them time off, that like makes an immediate difference in their lives, in their children's lives, right? Like, and that's like a child's life is like a whole universe. Like, those things really matter. But at this point, after we've seen like care, like from a federal legislative point of view, like we've had opportunities to fund care, paid leave, home-based and community care, and our government just has not done that. 3 times now, they haven't done it. And there's just, at this point, it's not enough to do things as individuals. Like, we can do a lot, but it's not going to fundamentally change. And I just think about it's not our fault. This is the system that we inherited, but it is on us. We can't afford to like pass on that responsibility. And so I think about how we can make systemic change. And that's another piece that I want to talk about with you, about what Hand in Hand is doing to get people to be involved at the level that they are able to, because we're all doing it all the time, but to start thinking about how we make those institutional changes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a theme you and I have been talking about throughout this program is how care is public and political,
Yeah.
but too often, because of those different systemic forces and maybe even different cultural pieces within our communities and families,
Sure, yeah.
we see care as no, this is private. I'm going to handle it. I don't need to tell anybody else about it. And it's mine to deal with, that, which also feeds into some of the shame or embarrassment, all the pieces that we've been naming, right? But in fact, we have seen under COVID, but also all of us, that the more we recognize and are able to connect our individual personal stories to our communities, we see actually care is universal. And so many of us have a connection, whether we are giving care to someone, receiving care or support, whether later in our life we will need care, or whether we've experienced and the benefit of having someone support us and really raise us, right? For those of us who got to have access to childcare in addition to our parents and our grandparents, our aunts. So that we're part of the big challenge we're taking on at Hand in Hand, and I think overall in the care movement, is to really invite all of us who have care stories, who are part of a majority in this country,
Yeah.
who know why care matters, to really lift that up as an issue that we vote on, that we are activated on, that we're talking to our friends and neighbors about, that we're finding even grassroots ways of mutual aid to support it,
Yes.
practicing it as employers in our homes, so that we launched a project called I Care, I Vote.
Yeah.
For this midterm election. It's a C3 project, so there's not really specific candidates or campaigns that we're asking people to support. We're asking people to vote with care in mind. What's your own stories? What is your story that, as you think about what are the laws I want passed, who are the leaders that I want in office, those are what are going to make a difference for me and my community, and ultimately the whole country, if we really are able to invest in home and community-based services, invest in childcare, and see that as really what we need to save our
Yeah.
frankly.
So I want there, if so people can go and find this pledge now. And truly, well, the things that it gets you is an opportunity for a free book in this immediate moment. But also, this is not. This is really just saying. I think it's an important first step. It's like the same way that we would look, again, to go back to that looking in the mirror moment and be like, as a mother, I'm an essential worker. Like, I help the world go round with what I do, right? It's looking in the mirror and saying, my home is somebody's workplace. And it's just a way, I think, of really holding yourself accountable and asking yourself to do that, you know, in the voting process, to be like, a lot of times, like, choices are clear, but to really understand, like, have I ever heard this candidate share a care story? Have I heard this candidate talk about their family? Right.
Yeah.
That is really, because we need people who represent us, who look like us. I want more of that, but who also can speak to struggling to figure out, you know, family leave and childcare. Like, I want people representing me who have direct experience with that. And I think that's, you know, hugely important. And so I would encourage everyone, that's a first step that you can take, like, right now.
Yep.
And that connects you to the movement that Hand in Hand is involved in and gives you opportunities down the line, right? And in terms of voting, because sometimes I do get in my cynical state where I'm like, okay, voting, like, what's it going to do, right? I'm not going to lie. I have those moments all the time. But again, this is not a fight that I'm ever going to give up on. But this is something that really floors me. So we know that 8 out of 10 voters in the United States support paid family leave. Very similar shares support home-based and community care. All of this stuff that has been talked about in bills and then has been jettisoned, right? And when you're talking at the number of 8 out of 10, that transcends party lines. Just to be clear. That is, and I loved what you said earlier in our conversation, like, we are the caring majority, right? So, like, I want us to get out there, and, like, voting is, in fact, one of the best ways that we can show this, right? To be like, you are responsible to us, and we are saying in such strong, clear numbers, and also by sharing our stories and also, like, contacting people and speaking about it. But, like, we need to, you know, we need to hold government accountable to our priorities and needs. It doesn't seem like anyone feels accountable to us right now. And I also know that no one will if what we do is sit it out. So I think it's crucial. And I say this again as someone who is struggling with, like, my own sort of cynicism around electoral politics. But when I hear those numbers, I know that we are on the right side of this, and we have to continue this, because I think we can win these things.
Yes.
We can't afford not to.
Yes, yes. And by signing the pledge, you're pretty much joining a community, a movement of people who are working for further change, whether it's organizing for worker protections and rights, or fighting for home care investment on the federal, all the way levels. What can we all do? So we really try to create more opportunities where we can be actually making cohesive that majority.
Yes.
Because we're all a part of it, and sometimes we're just not connected to it, and rightfully so. It's been a hard 2.5 years.
Like, no, you know, this is, like, I understand. Like, it's been a lot. Like, if you've had to, like, sit out for a while, like, that's good. Take care of yourself. But
yeah,
like, the movement is here, and it's really just waiting to welcome you, right? Absolutely. And when you learn, again, like, it's things will, when I thinking about this, the I Care, I Vote pledge, it really forces you to think about what's important to me, right? And then when you get sort of dialed into what else is going on, like, is it what I want to really be a part of is getting a domestic workers bill of rights passed in my city, right? Do I want to be connected to other people in my town or in my state who are thinking about how to be more responsible employers, right? Or am I really, is this to me, like, primarily an immigration issue, right? And my family story. This is how I want to get involved. Like, you can take whatever your best human gift is, whatever you have, whatever bandwidth you have, like you can plug into this, right? You don't have to hand in hand, National Domestic Workers Alliance, who you work closely with, like it's all there. Like this work has been ongoing and like we need everyone and you can join in and that's all there and we can build on that momentum and advance it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. So we've talked about the I Care, I Vote pledge. The link is in our bio. I think it might be showing up in the
It's
comments.
right there in the chat.
Right on. Okay. And then, and if you sign it right now, you can win a copy of Essential Labor by Angela Garbes. We're going to do a little bit of a drawing of folks who sign the pledge today during this Instagram Live. You're also welcome. If this has gotten you fired up and you want to talk more to people about your own care story and hear people's care stories, we're doing a phone bank this Thursday at 4 o'clock Pacific to be calling through hand-in-hand lists, people who actually already have signed a petition at some point because they said, I support domestic workers or I believe in care investment. And this is just a chance to invite their further participation, right? If you've got some energy, I know a lot of people are doing a lot for this election, as well as taking care of themselves from the trauma of this case. But if you've got some juice and energy, please join on Thursday for a phone bank.
Yeah, and you're going to be calling, again, like Stacey said, you'll be calling people who are like-minded, right? Like people who, you know, want to be engaged on this or already thinking about it. So you're not calling people who are like, who the what? You know, these are people who want to hear from you and want to work together.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And really, what I've heard from all the folks who phone banked is that it's been so heartening in a really hard and dark time that we're in. And a hard time partly because we haven't been as connected, and a dark time because there's just a lot of questions. I gotta not watch as much news as I do because but it's a chance for that balance of inspiration.
Being on a phone call with someone can counter that sort of like disconnect. And you know, all the phone banks that I've ever done, I've totally gone into it being like like nervous. I don't know, like I'm like, talking to strangers is hard. And true for me, every single phone bank I've ever done, I've had like made some kind of wonderful connection or just had a very human moment where I was like, yes, I'm doing the right thing. People are okay, right? People are good.
Yeah. Well, we can open it. We have a few more minutes. We can open it up for questions from the audience. If there's questions or comments, we'd love to hear your care story. Who are you? Put it in the chat. Are you someone who provides childcare or home care or an employer in your home? Are you someone who's receiving care and support in your home?
Are you someone who's doing all of those things?
Yep.
And receiving, you know,
a multi-level sandwich generation.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. As well as your experiences and your thoughts on what we've been sharing in this in this Instagram live. All the waves. Hi back to you. Let's see. Should I scroll down to look at the questions if there have been questions?
Sure.
Let's see.
I'm not touching the screen because things go
wrong.
I
know. Oh gosh, am I going to shut it off? No, that's what I would do. Can find our resources. Yay. Yes, thank you, ESL Silver. I think many people want to be ethical employers and they just don't have the resources. It's true. It's the setup of this industry.
Yeah. But once they know about hand in hand, then that is no longer true because there are those resources.
It's true.
It's amazing. It's waiting for you. And I feel that so clearly. I know there are so many people who want to do better and just are not quite sure how.
Yep. Fans of Angela on the line, welcome. We're happy to connect with you at Hand in Hand too. Welcome. Okay. Woo, lots of people. This is amazing. Hi. And I think all over the country because I recognize some of you from the East Coast too. Okay. Well, I am just This has been so much both fun. I don't know if fun makes it sound much lighter. This has been profound
No,
and
I think profound things can be fun.
I guess
Do
so.
both at
Okay.
the same
Fun and profound chatting with you, Angela, on this Tuesday morning.
Oh, I just want to
Before our
really
election.
comment here saying that I love this. My new effort is to ask for help from parents in my community. And honestly, it feels so great, but felt so weird at first. I think that's like one of the themes of our conversation. We are discouraged from doing those things. And,
Yeah.
and it's fear because we're like, will I be accepted? Will I be seen?
Yep.
And, the majority of the times I think it works out well. People are really human. We need each other. People want to connect. People want to take care. People want
Yeah.
to, and I love that. It's, yeah, once you like break through that wall, it's, reorienting your life around care and asking for it and receiving it is, I mean, I'll just say this for me, doing that, which is something that I have done like really actively in the last like 3 years, 4 years since I had a second child. It's definitely since I had a second child. It has just like, it's fueled so much abundance in my life. It's made such a better, it's made my life so much better and richer in a way that and I feel like every day it pays dividends. And so I would like to like leave us too with that thought of like how much better our lives could be, how much less guilt and shame, and how much more shared joy and responsibility we can have.
Yay. That is a good place to end our conversation. One thing I'd add though too is an act of resistance. That connection,
Yes.
act of resistance of all the things that you were naming earlier that actually have forced us apart, that have made this care work and support invisible, sort of tried to make people think, oh, I can do this all by myself when nobody.
No, you can't.
Nobody. And it's okay. There's no that.
Not, and like even people who can outsource all of it and seem like they're doing it on their own, like they don't have the sort of joy that we have. They don't have kind of connection. And yes, yeah, it's a huge part of our resistance. I think that joy, that piece of it, no, none of our people survived to get us here by suffering unnecessarily and extra. They found connection and joy. And that's exactly why we get to be here and to continue this work.
Yay!
Yay!
So enjoy. Thank you all for joining us on this Instagram Live. Yay. Don't forget to follow us. And then also join a phone bank, talk to other people and hear their care stories too this Thursday, 4 to 6 Pacific. And then finally sign that pledge and you will be eligible to participate in a drawing for a copy of Essential Labor with by Angela Garbes. And thank you, Angela Garbes. This has been really, it's made my day.
It's been so fun. Thank you. I know this is a great way to start my day.
Great.
Thank you, Stacy.
Thank
you, everyone.
Thank you all for joining.
Bye-bye.